At about 2 a.m. on May 2, 1976, Jeanette Williams was shot to death in her apartment in the Newtown neighborhood of Jacksonville, Florida. Her partner, 26-year-old Nina Marshall, was also shot. Marshall would tell police that she felt a stinging sensation in her neck. She then fell to the floor and pretended to be dead. Marshall said that the men who shot her stepped over her bleeding body as they left the bedroom, and then she waited a few minutes before leaving the apartment to get help. Marshall flagged down a passing motorist and was taken to University Hospital and told police that Williams, who was 30, was still at the apartment. By the time police arrived, around 2:30, a crowd had gathered near the apartment. Many of these people had been at a party just up the street when they heard shots being fired, which was not unusual in the neighborhood. Police found Williams's body inside the apartment and began canvassing the crowd for witnesses. Hubert Nathan Myers, known as Nate, approached the officers. He said he had been at the party and lived in the second bedroom of the apartment. He went inside with the police, and when he saw the body, he cried out, "My God, it's Baldy," using a nickname for Williams. Marshall had been shot twice in the neck and once in the left arm. While she was at the hospital, she told officers that she and Williams had been shot by two men who stood at the foot of the bed, and she identified one of her shooters as Clifford Williams Jr., who was not related to Jeanette Williams. He was 33, owned a pool hall and was a known heroin dealer. Marshall was an addict and an on-and-off customer, and she said Williams had shot them over a $100 debt for rent he paid on their apartment. Clifford Williams was in the crowd while police worked the crime scene. He was quickly arrested at about 3 a.m. As he was being taken away, he yelled out for someone to call his attorney and get a list of the partygoers who could give him an alibi. 10 minutes later, the hospital radioed again. Marshall had named the second shooter, Nathan Myers, who was also Clifford Williams's nephew and managed the pool hall. Marshall said she had then seen both of them on the street after she staggered outside. Myers, who was 18 and had no violent criminal record, was also arrested that evening. Both men were tested for gunshot residue a few hours later. The tests came back negative. Many of the 40 or so attendees were lesbians, part of a tight-knit group that were close friends with Jeanette Williams. In statements to the police taken during the next month, all of them remembered Williams and Myers being at the party, and nearly all of them said the men had been there when the shots were fired. The bedroom where the women were shot was very small, 9 feet by 12 feet, with the bed taking up most of the space. The space at the foot of the bed was cramped and hard to get to. The initial investigation also found holes in the window curtains and screen, a deformation with a carbonaceous material in the frame, and broken glass on the bed, suggesting the shots came from outside. But the investigating officers dismissed that scenario because it clashed with Marshall's statements. Instead, they wrote, "It appears as though the suspects in this case intended to make it look as though the victims had been shot by someone from the bedroom window." The officers would also note in their report that the physical evidence at the scene is entirely consistent with the statements of the victim. In addition, although Marshall claimed there had been 2 shooters and 2 guns firing until their chambers were empty, only 6 fresh bullets were recovered from her and Williams. They were all .38 caliber. A .32 slug was also recovered from Williams, but it was covered in scar tissue, indicative of an old wound. Myers and Williams were each charged with murder and attempted murder, with Williams facing the death penalty if convicted. Prosecutors tried to cut a deal with Myers, promising him either 2 years, his account, or 5 years, the prosecutor's account, if he pled guilty and testified against his uncle. He declined. Their first trial began in late July 1976 and ended in a mistrial. Their second trial began September 1, 1976. It lasted 2 days. The state had 6 witnesses and presented no forensic evidence, relying instead on the testimony of Marshall to place Williams and Myers in her bedroom during the shooting. At the time, Florida courts allowed defense attorneys to make the final closing argument if they waived calling their own witnesses. The men's attorneys used this strategy. The jury didn't hear about the alibis, the glass fragments on the bed, the holes in the window screen, or the failure to find evidence of a second gun. When one of the defense attorneys recalled an evidence technician to discuss testing the defendant's clothes for blood, and finding none, the technician also noted he had swabbed their hands to test for gunpowder. But the attorney never asked about the results of those tests. Both men were convicted. Myers was sentenced to life in prison, with parole possible after 25 years. The jury recommended a life sentence for Williams, but the trial judge overruled the jury's recommendation and sentenced him to death. In 1980, the Florida Supreme Court reduced his sentence to life, also with the possibility of parole after 25 years.
In early 2017, Myers read a newspaper article about the formation of a conviction integrity unit in the state attorney's office for the 4th Judicial Circuit, which includes Jacksonville and Duval County. He quickly wrote to State Attorney Melissa Nelson, asserting his and his uncle's innocence based on 4 key points. First, were the numerous alibi witnesses who had not been called at trial. Second, were the results of the gunshot residue tests. Third, was the gunshot residue on the window frame and other forensic evidence suggesting the shooting had come from outside the bedroom. And fourth, was the insufficiency of Marshall's testimony. In a follow-up letter, Myers included a copy of the ballistics report and a surprising piece of potential new evidence. A man named Nathaniel Lawson had confessed to the crime before he died in 1994. The 4th Circuit CIU began a reinvestigation of the case. There were several complications. Marshall had died in 2001, as had several potential alibi witnesses. But the forensic evidence was powerful. Along with the apparent bullet holes in the window and the frame, a more thorough examination of the wounds on Williams and Marshall indicated they had been shot from the side, not from the foot of the bed, which also supported the theory of an outside shooter. The medical examiner's report had noted a lack of gunpowder residue on Williams or the bed sheets. That would have been unlikely if the shots had come from close range in the tiny room.
Free to face a whole new world, a very different one from the world they left in 1976.
It's nerve-wracking right now, really. I'm nervous, because I feel like I'm still locked up. My mother, she died while I was on death row, and I just wanted to get out of it.
Praise the Lord.
Nathan Myers kisses the ground after taking his first steps into freedom alongside his uncle, Clifford Williams Jr. Williams was 34 when convicted. He's now 76. Myers was 18. He's now 64. This is an opportunity both men didn't think would happen after serving 42 years in prison for a murder in 1976.
My mother, she died while I was on death row, and I just wanted to get out and it was me with my 6 kids. They was gone, and it wasn't nobody but them. So I wrote all the other projects. I wrote lawyers. They wouldn't listen. They told them our case was too old. They didn't have the evidence to free us.
With the help from the Innocence Project, the team reevaluated the shooting that killed Jeanette Williams and injured Nina Marshall after they were ambushed at their apartment in 1976. Nina Marshall identified Myers and Williams as the shooters. State Attorney Melissa Nelson says both men were at a party at the time gunshots rang out. The unit spoke with witnesses, re-examined evidence, and recreated a virtual computer model of the actual crime scene to determine how the shooting occurred. The new evidence led to the judge granting Myers and Williams be set free.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Myers, the indictments have been dismissed against you. You are free to go.
Thank the Lord, Savior Jesus Christ. You know, it's a nerve wracking right now, really. I'm nervous, you know, because I feel like I'm still locked up. Once I get my family, knowing I can look back and I don't have no officers around me telling me what to do and how to do it, and the reality hit in, I think I'll be all right.
Myers says he's not bitter about what happened, but is grateful he can live the rest of his life as a free man.